Radio Free Skaro!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Radio Free Skaro, episode number 925. I am Stephen in Edmonton.
Warren in Vancouver.
And Chris in Edmonton.
What a week. What an exciting episode we have for you today. Sure, there's a new trailer for Doctor Who and all that, and it was really great. We'll talk about it, but we do a big old deep dive into the long lost, it has been lost, it's on DVD, but you can't find it anymore, Canadian-made science fiction classic, The Starlost, with our friends Jason Davis, who is Harlan Ellison's editor towards the end of his life, and friend as well, and also our friend Annette Wierstra, who I told her about this show, and she became enthralled with it. And both of us watched 16 episodes of The Starlost in the space of a week to prepare for our
Lunacy.
Yeah.
I've seen all of them, but it took me about a month. So
yeah, well, I never want to watch it again. After all that, Chris, did you end up ever watching an episode at all of The Starlost?
I have not yet, and I only just this morning learned about the pseudonym of Cordwainer Bird.
Yep,
for Harlan Ellison.
Yeah, that's his nom de plume for when he was dissatisfied with the project, which was
his Smithy of the sort.
Yeah, his Alan Smithy.
Yeah. I mentioned that the DVD...
His Robin Bland.
Exactly. I mentioned that the DVD is... Annette has one, I have one, Warren has one, but you can't find it. I looked on Amazon and you couldn't find it. So
it's on Amazon.
Is it on Amazon? Oh, it said currently unavailable.
Amazon Canada.
Yeah.
I looked this morning, it said like 2 copies left, $30. So.
Chris, why aren't you snatching it up?
Get it on it, yeah. But I uploaded the entire series on my YouTube channel, links in the show notes. So if you want to watch the whole show, a lot of people do. I get so many comments from that. Like the first episode alone has like 150,000 like hits or something like that. Like it's madness. Anyway,
that's madness. That is madness.
It is.
Too bad you can't monetize that piracy.
I know, right?
That's probably more people than watched it originally.
Maybe. I'm just trying.
I'm
just trying to spread the love a little bit for the Starlost. That's all. I don't need to take any financial gain in doing that. So. But more on that later. All you're here to talk about the trailer, the new trailer, which as we talk here on a Saturday afternoon in Edmonton, Alberta, and Vancouver. The new trailer dropped at 2 months to the day to the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who. A big old trailer, proper actual 2-minute trailer of the upcoming 3 specials. That being the Star Beast. I don't think we have any footage yet of Wide Blue Yonder and then the Giggle, where it was been confirmed what everyone has been talking about for a year, that Neil Patrick Harris is playing the Toymaker.
No C word, Toymaker. Just Toymaker.
Just Toymaker.
The unnamed Toymaker.
I don't think was he actually called the Celestial Toymaker in...
No.
I don't remember.
I think he's actually...
Was that just on the Target book? Is that what that came from?
Well, no.
That was a story title. Episode title.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I suppose so, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what it was. A Celestial Toy Room was episode 1 of that particular story. I don't know if they actually had a internal...
It's been a while since I've read the book or watched a recon or whatever, but I want to say Celestial Toymaker was not used, like that phrase.
Maybe not. Thoughts on the trailer, gentlemen? What did you think of this crazy trailer that came out here?
Chris, you want to go first?
Sure. At the end, they shooted themselves in the foot.
You've been holding on to that one for an hour and a half, Chris. That's
probably should have kept holding on to it. Actually,
Yep, probably.
Yeah, there's it's always a shooty tease is always a good thing. I think.
But that is the best part of the trailer, as far as I'm concerned. Like that was the part where I'm like, oh, like the rest of it's good, but that was the tip top. But anyway, sorry, Chris, keep going.
I mean, it's a trailer. What can you really say? I enjoyed the structure of it.
Right.
I did. because you see stuff like everything's like nice and calm in London, and then things progressively get more blowy uppy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right. It's still kind of weird that we haven't seen anything from Blue Yonder.
Pointedly so.
In time.
Yeah.
Well, I know we've talked in the past about how that was the last one that they were working on for post for whatever reason.
Right.
But I'm curious about what we haven't seen. But yeah, it's fine. It's very, very Donna heavy, as the whole trilogy is going to be, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Which is
Warren,
great.
Warren, you said how much you enjoyed her let's kick their ass comment.
That's my second favorite part of the whole trailer, is where she's like, "Let's kick its ass." I'm like, "Yeah, Donna's back," and she's annoyed. Yeah. Hooray!
Mm-hmm.
The more I see of David Tennant as the 14th Doctor, the more I realize it really has been 15 years.
He does look older, doesn't he? I mean,
he does look older.
It's amazing how
Catherine
all
Tate
age.
barely looks like she's aged, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
No, she looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Not that Tennant doesn't look fantastic, because
he's still a very handsome man.
He's still very pretty, but I don't know. What's a trailer, dude?
It's fun.
What I found interesting is that we don't see all that much, and it took me a while to figure this out, of the Star Beast. We've seen more of the Star Beast in the other one than we have in this one, to be honest with you.
I think we see a couple more shots, like this, sort of hiding behind someone's leg, and
this is pretty Toymaker heavy, very Toymaker heavy.
Yeah,
and very, very little of the whatever the other race that's chasing the Star Beast is called. I can't remember.
I can't remember what they're called either.
Yeah, the green dudes with red eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that was confirmed. So we talked a while back about how Google Maps or Google Earth had essentially a Doctor Who spoiler on it, because if you looked at the satellite photos of Bad Wolf Studios, at least for a while, I don't know if it's still there yet, you could see what looked like a helicopter landing pad with a unit logo on it. And that exact helicopter pad appears at the top of this Avengers-esque building in London.
Not Avengers-esque. That basically is the Avengers building. I wonder if they had access to that same model.
Maybe with the helicopter pad on it. Yeah. Anyway, that's what that. So there you go. So that's what they were shooting when they were shooting that stuff. There, it was that exact helicopter pad. It's in a parking lot in Wales. That's where that parking lot. That's where that helicopter pad is.
By the way, remember when Book of Boba Fett shot most of their stuff in a parking lot with a bunch of green screen, and the internet was up in arms because, surprise, surprise, special effects heavy TV shows are special effects heavy. And I hear none of this complaining about the exact same thing here on Doctor Who.
I know.
Exactly. Just looking at Google Maps, the image of Wolf Studios, yes, it still has the helipad in the parking lot.
There you are. Yep, it's been on Google Earth for months.
The spin-off confirmed.
Yeah.
Well, there's a whole bunch of heavy equipment in there too.
Yeah. Well, it was all for that one episode of Doctor Who.
Bob the Builder crossover confirmed.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean,
now we just see Thomas the Tank Engine.
No, it's very exciting. Twitter seems to be alight with how exciting it is. I like this kind of trailer where it's not just like a sizzle reel of stuff that's happening. There's a proper narrative built towards it. There's there's ups and downs. There's pauses. There's emotional moments. There's even flashbacks to Journey's End in there as well.
Flashbacks.
Flashbacks of Journey's End. It's in there, and
I gotta say,
probably from the new Blu-ray set.
Exactly. Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me. I gotta say that RTD has always been better at trailers. Like the RTD era kind of had the best trailers. Honestly, I can't think of better ones in the Moffat era. I could be proven wrong here, except for the Day of the Doctor one. But other than that,
especially relative to the Chibnall era. The RTD era had trailers, full stop.
Well, yeah, but even the Moffat era's trailers weren't quite as good as the RTD. RTD is, I got my problems with some bits and pieces of what he does, but he is a showman above all, and he's very good at that.
He is. Yes, indeed. I hope it turns out okay. Just because speaking of someone who did watch Journey's End and some of the lesser lights that at the time I was annoyed by, and fortunately I am still annoyed by them. Hopefully it'll be okay. I'm sure it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Where are you at now?
I'm in Capaldi now. I'm loving it.
Are you into Capaldi?
Yeah. Series 9 of Capaldi and My Pilgrimage. I'm sort of just watching them as I get to them now, because I know that life's going to get busier in October and November. So I'm not necessarily watching one a day anymore. Plus, there's a certain little game called Starfield, which is tying up all my waking hours, which is
and
wonderful.
Mine. Well, Maybe not quite as many as yours, but I am definitely neglecting all my other gaming duties for this game.
Yeah. But Doctor Who coming back will certainly get me to watch more of that, obviously, because I'm looking forward to it. It still says November for the launch of these 3 specials. I'm still betting November 23rd through 25th, 3 nights in a row.
Is there like a legal reason for this? Like, or what's the deal? Or is it just teasing us?
Who, me?
Teasing pretty much no.
November. Yeah. Teasing not releasing the schedule to, Channel 4 ITV.
I hope they're not still thinking about that. Like, we're going to see what ITV is going to put on the other side. I know.
No. Well, we'll talk a little more about that sort of thing momentarily.
We will. Yeah.
It's just teasing.
Here's the thing. We talk a lot about on the show about things that are to come and appearances of people and stuff like that. We don't usually do set report photos and stuff like that, but Jemma Redgrave was seen on set shooting stuff for Doctor Who, and in fact she confirmed that last week on the one show or whatever it was. I can't remember what she was on, and she's here now in this, and I'm not sure I can't remember if they've actually confirmed it. The BBC put out a little thing, hey, Kate Stewart's back is Unit, and I feel like the fact that they put out a thing like that means that it hasn't been officially announced until they went with the trailer. But anyway, Kate Stewart's back, hopefully being better used than she was in Doctor Who Flux, which she was very much an afterthought and unnecessary to the plot. But she looks like she's properly back in this one.
Somebody should come up with
Flux or Power of the Doctor.
She was in Power of the Doctor. That's right. Well, Flux she was also in there, but like, what's
somebody Simon Garrier should come up with like a stock chart sort of thing of the rise and fall of Unit, because my word, through the entire last 2 or 3 eras, wasn't during the Missy era, wasn't Unit like 3 people in a room? and then they had budget cuts, and they had a tower, and now they have another tower with helicopters, and they had a spaceship in the RTD era or whatever, like that flying fortress thingy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great question. The Valiant, you mean? Yeah. That's what happened. What happened to the Tower of London? Why are they in this big skyscraper? Very, as you said, Stephen, very Avengers style.
Very Avengers. Also, they're like, the original building blew up in Power of the Doctor, so they built a new one. Obviously, they've forgone like the secret organization that
no kidding
that was in the 70s or 80s, depending on the protocol.
Liberty Hall, Dr. Tyler, Liberty Hall.
Yeah, it's they're a little more ostentatious now, which is, I suppose, eventually you're just going to become that way. Thinking, okay, there's Unit again. It's like Torchwood wasn't secret for a while. Oh, bloody Torchwood! Here they are again.
They weren't that secret.
Them and
with their multi-sirened truck.
Yeah. But it's black, though, so therefore it's secret.
Oh, okay.
Like wears black. It's like, oh, well, I don't know who they are. They're a secret, even though the helicopters say Unit. The helicopter pad says Unit. The building says Unit.
Could mean anything. Universal Intelligence Force, for instance.
Could be indeed. Anyway, I've looked through the trailer a lot, and it's fun and exciting, and it's fun to be excited about Doctor Who coming back again in 2 months' time or a little less, depending on when it happens. I'm very curious as to when Disney Plus is going to start getting on board with this, just because they've got Loki coming up. When is that? October 5th,
I think, something like that. 6th,
somewhere
somewhere in that neighborhood. Yeah.
And then I think, and that's 6 episodes, and that ends so probably like early November, something like that. And then I don't think they have anything else properly. Like they bumped a couple of those little spin-off shows up the schedule a bit.
Yeah, and Ashoka will be done long before then. It'll be done beginning of next month. So
yeah, Ahsoka's done in a week and a half.
In 2 weeks' time. Yeah. So
am I going to miss it? Not really.
I am enjoying the hell out of that series.
Oh, that's good.
I'm not.
I'm glad you are, Chris.
I'm not.
It's my Andor.
So. Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Andor was. I'm not going to badmouth it, other than to say it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But Ahsoka, I am digging the hell out of.
Oh, good. Good on you, Chris.
But I also did, you watched Rebels, Stephen, right?
Yeah, 10 years ago, and I don't remember anything but it, so that's why I'm not enjoying Ahsoka, that's why.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
There's just too, as I've said before, there's too much Star Wars nowadays.
There is.
There's also too much Marvel. One thing I was saying off air was that for all our complaining about not enough Doctor Who, I think we're getting just enough Doctor Who, frankly. We don't hate it now.
I'm curious to see, so much has happened in the space of a year. About 11 months, actually, to the day almost, that it was announced that Doctor Who's going to be on BBC, on Disney Plus rather, and we all thought, oh wow, Disney Plus is going to be spin-offs. We just assumed there's going to be spin-offs, and RTD's been talking about spin-offs, and everyone just assumes it's going to be spin-offs. And then in that time, like Disney went from like Titans to like, oh no, we're losing money and we need to replace our CEO, and we got to push back all this Marvel stuff. And there's strikes happening, everything, and all of a sudden, like the atmosphere around Disney is much different than when it was a year ago. Mm-hmm. And you're right. I'm kind of hoping that there isn't like 3 Doctor Who themed series a year, because that would be awful. I think it would diminish the brand a little bit, but
it's a big target too, is what it is.
I wouldn't mind
sneak
one.
In and sneak out.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind one. You know, one a year. Like have a 8-episode Doctor Who series, because that's what they're going to be now. 8 episodes. Then you have like a 6-part contained little story of a spin-off somewhere.
Yeah, that's fine.
Midway. And then you have a Christmas special, and then you're back with Doctor Who, and then another little spin-off, you know. And maybe you just tell them in self-contained stories like that. And now, you know, with Disney having to kick stuff down the schedule a bit because of strikes and everything, and because they think they've diluted their brand a little too much. Honestly, maybe something that's like, hey, they're shooting Doctor Who right now. We only have to pay to distribute it. We don't have to pay to make it. We're not paying, you know, to not make it either. Well, this seems like a good idea. Maybe we should hope for more Doctor Who themed stuff from the UK, you know?
This is completely irrational, but I do get a bit of a, you know, where they go at the beginning of a horror movie and they're like, should we go in this haunted house? And they for about a minute say no, and then they go in anyway. That's kind of the feeling I get wandering into Disney Plus.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of people think, you know, a unit spinoff is like, it feels natural. I've come around to not wanting one, if only because every spinoff we've had from Doctor Who has basically been a cheaper thing, which means if it's cheaper, they're going to do it on Earth. They're going to set it on Earth. And every time it feels like, well, the Doctor's always here for the alien invasions on Earth. Why isn't he here this time? You know, whenever Torchwood does a big thing, it's like, oh, there's a Doctor, or Class, oh, where's the Doctor? Or even Sarah Jane Smith, where's the Doctor? You know, he's never there. I think this is a good opportunity. Maybe they've already been doing it, because I remember when David Tennant was hinting early on after he was announced as Doctor Who thing, a lot of, you know nothing. There's so much going on behind the scenes when it comes to Doctor Who. Maybe they've been shooting a entire spin-off series in Badwell Studios, because they're massive studios in there. Like they're like 4 times the size as Roth Lock was, and maybe they're shooting like a non-Earth based spin-off.
Maybe a volume based spin-off.
A volume based one, you know, because I always thought that you could make a spin-off into not about the Daleks, but like a small group of people fighting.
Duck with you so far.
Yeah. You know, like a small group of people fighting the Daleks. So the Daleks aren't always there. You're not seeing it from their perspective, but they're the main antagonist, and maybe they actually win or something like that. Because the thing with the Daleks, they've been on Doctor Who like 35 times, and they always win. The Doctor always beats them. It would be kind of neat to have the Daleks actually do
that'd be cool.
Like Rogue One up a Doctor Who spin-off where, you know, that sort of thing.
Kyle
like
Reese sort of thing.
Yeah,
exactly.
That sort of thing. I think that would be kind of an interesting way of doing a Doctor Who spin-off and not having everyone wonder where Poochie is, you know?
Or you do something like Andor, in that like Andor is aimed at a more mature, more thoughtful audience than, say, Ashoka is, for instance.
Right.
I mean, I'm not insulting Ashoka by saying that. I'm just saying Ashoka's more pop fun, and Andor is more deliberate. And so you could do that with Doctor Who, because the last time they tried to do an adult one, it was Torchwood, which was a little sophomoric, honestly, until Children of Earth. So do something, which is fine. Mm-hmm. You know, people like that. They enjoy it. Great, whatever. But maybe do something in the Doctor Who universe that is a little more adult and a little less sci-fi. It'd be interesting to see what they could pull off. But who knows? This is all complete speculation.
It is speculation, but I know that there has been chatter about spin-offs happening, and I remember hearing some rumors and some stuff about 1 or 2 happening that I think got out there. You know, like, oh, it's going to be Daleks or Sea Devils or something like that. And maybe it is, and maybe that's the way you do it. Maybe that's the way you do it, to sort of take it out of the Doctor's the Doctor's hands, but keep it in the Doctor Who universe, so that you have like. You know, we have their specials coming up. We have our Christmas special which introduces Ncuti Gatwa, and then his first series is in April spring of 2024. It's probably going to be April. And then that's for 8 series. And then in the fall, you have a spinoff, and then you have a Christmas special coming up, and then that's sort of your regular return rate, you know? That's the way of doing it.
When's Easter next year? Is that April?
I don't know. It always changes, doesn't it?
March 31st is Easter Sunday.
31st is Easter Sunday.
So, because I'm just wondering, like you saying spring, saying April, whatever. I mean, we had the one Easter special, but
yeah,
I'm wondering if Easter might be a good launching pad for things for the Ncuti Gatwa series.
Maybe.
I know what you bring back on Easter. Don't scare the hair. That's what you bring back on Easter.
That's true. It's very true.
Damn right.
Also, for what it's worth, Doctor Who did use the term celestial toymaker twice in episode 1 in talking about it.
Oh, did he?
But never again.
Was that the Doctor explaining to Stephen and Dodo?
Yeah, exactly. Who's the celestial toymaker? Well, let me tell you about the celestial toymaker. And then that was it. And then they just called him the toymaker after that. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Michael Gough never spoke the words, though.
Yeah. Was celestial meant to mean outer space, or was it to mean mysterious and from a different part of the world? Which is
I think it was meant to mean space, but also leaned on the other one.
The costume designer thought, celestial. Obviously, we're going to stick him in some stock Chinese outfit or something for some reason.
Yeah.
A little bit.
You will not see any of that in this Toymaker. I'm
no.
pretty sure.
Patrick Harris, I'm going to call him by his last name. Patrick Harris, or his last 2 names, I guess, has a weird sort of German Austrian accent for part of it. I don't know if that's going to be.
I mean, that is Toymaker-y. It's kind of like Geppetto, sort of. That's probably what they're going with.
I don't know. I feel like
he's not German. That's Italian. But
we see him in like 3 completely different outfits in that trailer alone. I feel like he's one of those people who will just sort of like throw in funny voices here and there. Just to be fun.
They should just call him Captain Camp. That's what it's going to be. So
a little bit, yeah.
So yeah, the funny voices are going to be part of that, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Anyway, what are your ideas about Doctor Who's spin-offs and the trailer? Contact us on the 17 different social networks that...
on Threads.
No. Only on Threads.
Only on Threads. We're only on Threads. We've decided to just put all of our energy into Threads. Because if we're the only one talking there, then we own it. And at this point, it's going to be that way. No, social media is annoying. I don't know if you know this now, but having to cross post things to like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Mastodon, and Blue Sky. That's the big 6. Which is what I focus on.
Hootsuite needs to step up its game.
It does.
They're here in town. I'll go over there and raise a stink.
Please do.
Just be glad the metaverse never caught on, or we'd have to have our own little Radio Free Skaro parish in there, and the legless minions would have to.
Yeah.
Oh no, they have legs now. Pardon me, they have legs now in Horizon World, which nobody ever uses.
No, believe you. All right. The reason what's also annoying, because we have to brace for this, and because when we do Fluid Links, we do our Fluid Links advent calendar every year, and we usually, in the old days, we just sort of cast the net out on Twitter, and it would be easy to call from that. But like now, what we do, like a lot of people have left Twitter, and justifiably so. And it's difficult to keep track of 6 different things, social media network, because some people might go, I'm going to ask the same question across 6 different things, and I have to go through and curate this and it. So we're thinking about ideas for what we do come December when it comes time for our Fluid Links advent calendar. But
carrier pigeon.
That could be it, actually. Yeah, email. Actually, not well. Maybe just stamped envelopes.
Self-addressed
stamp envelopes, of course, yeah. That's the way to do it. Anyway, is that it? Any more talk about trailer stuff, new Doctor Who coming in?
No, I think we covered it.
It
doesn't really tell us any more than we already knew, a little bit.
Just more, but but it, it whets excitement. It's a trailer. That's what trailers are for. Just to get you hyped up for more Doctor Who, so...
One thing, unless I missed it, was Wilf wasn't in the trailer.
Wilf was not in the trailer, no.
Yeah.
Was not, no. So I know that Bert and Cribbins will probably be in there somewhere, but I don't know how much they actually were able to shoot before his sad passing. So we'll see.
Well, if memory serves, they wrapped filming completely before he passed.
They did, yeah.
So whatever they were looking to get, I'm assuming they got.
I hope they did, yeah. Hope they did, for Bernard Cribbins' sake, because he was lovely. Here's a thing. The UK, the leading broadcasters, that being BBC, ITV, channels 4 and 5, are going to be launching a thing called Freely, which is free TV over the internet.
It's a good idea, I think.
Yeah, like basically a live streaming service over the interwebs for people. Basically, they're preparing for the end of cable is what's going on here. But
I mean, BBC's mandate is to spread this stuff far and wide. So, and more people of any economic background have a phone than have a TV. So it makes sense.
Well, like the thing says, what Freeview did for actual broadcast, they're trying to do for, making an internet version of that, basically. I'm just skimming the article. Does it say if you still need a TV license?
I don't know that. Probably. Maybe.
Let me tell you, when I fired up
strictly
VPN,
speaking, to watch iPlayer or whatever, you're supposed to have a TV license.
Well, for instance, today when I fired up the VPN and missed the stupid trailer on the VPN, it asked, "Do you have a license?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm the father of lies now." Yes, I do.
I love that.
A license to steal. BBC
I love
One.
that question. I just feel like, oh, bless. Just click yes. I have a license. Okay, good enough for us. Enjoy your BBC One. Thank you. Yeah. Not that we do that, of course. That would be rude.
No, that would be wrong.
That'd be very wrong indeed. Yeah. How dare I miss the Alan Carr. What was the game show that was on before the trailer?
Yeah, bad. That's what that game show was.
I don't remember the name of it. Anyway, it also, and then Strictly Come Dancing. I thought, man, this is what Saturday nights are now, isn't it? This is what's like cheesy game shows where the grand prize is £10,000 if you get absolutely every question right. Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what TV is on North America on a Saturday night, so
That's
maybe
true.
it's worse for all I know.
Let's hope it's not on Saturday nights anymore, is what I mean to say. I don't think Disney is going to happen. Like, yeah, sure, we'll drop our stuff on a Saturday. Everybody loves watching shows on Saturday. They probably won't. Anyway, what are you going to say, Chris?
I just enjoy this article. They talk about public service broadcasters and then start saying PSB instead. And all I can think of is Pet Shop Boys.
PSB.
Pet Shop Boys.
But more
important for trusted Pet Shop Boys content to be readily available to everyone.
I've seen British, UK middle-aged man Twitter. There is a lot of Pet Shop Boys content to begin with.
And Kate Bush. And Kate Bush.
Yes.
Oh, man, Kate Bush.
The twin galaxies of middle-aged gay Doctor Who male fandom
That's
in the UK,
true.
from what I can tell.
Yeah, but Kate Bush is like...
And I'm not slagging it.
No.
Fine, great, wonderful. I'm just saying there's a lot of it.
Kate Bush is just the patron saint of that community.
Well, you could pick worse.
Yeah.
You could definitely pick worse patron saints.
That's true.
Just to kind of talk about some of the bullet points in this article here.
Yeah.
So live TV delivers around half of all viewing in the UK. Half. So that's all catch up. That's all online. That's all VOD. That's whatever.
Is that good or bad? Like the way you're emphasizing it?
More just reflective of the shift, because as we would say ad nauseum when we talked about viewing figures and they only got 3.2 million or whatever versus 86 billion for Voyage of the Damned.
Right.
Just the TV landscape is just so radically different, even from 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then 15% or around 4 million of UK TV homes are currently broadband only homes.
That seems like a lot.
So Warren, you're saying about no TV. There you go.
Right. Yeah.
15%. Wow. That's a lot.
I know people without computers. They've just got a phone. I don't know that many, but I do know people who do that.
What?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could never do that. I mean, I edit video, for God's sakes. There's no way I could do that. But some people do. Like,
when it says broadband only, I'm assuming that also would factor like Roku's and Apple TVs and
I would think so. Yeah.
Whatever smart TVs that
or game consoles.
You just don't pay for your TV license or whatever. You don't watch over there or
Yeah. You know what throws me off? Erica was watching Heartstopper whenever it was on season 2 of Heartstopper. It was a cute show and everything like that. But like, what really threw me and what really made me feel old is the two of the characters are sitting together watching TV on their laptop. It's just like, oh my god, no, I'm not watching a movie on a laptop. I'm not gathering around to watch a movie on a 13-inch screen. That just seems foreign to me.
When I'm on a business trip, I'll do it. But other than that,
not even.
It's also kind of interesting to see, especially the flat screens, the push for like massive TVs.
Yeah, I know.
Put this 100-inch screen in your living room, and people are just sitting there on a 5-inch, 10-inch tablet, phone, whatever, and that's their viewing screen.
I know. You know what? It makes it tough when you're making a show because, as much as Christopher Nolan wants you to watch it on IMAX or something like that in a movie theater, it's just like there's a bunch of people, like the three of us, probably will want to watch something on a bigger screen of some sort. Mm-hmm. I've got a 5.1 setup because I can't do just stereo. It's just awful. It needs to be 5.1.
I just have stereo. I have a soundbar. I don't care.
Yeah, no, I love 5.1, and then there's people who just will watch it on a laptop, and a lot of people. Mark Ayers, especially, whenever he would comment about the sound mix on Doctor Who, on particularly because like the iPlayer was like more like geared towards stereo, so that we mush all the 5.1 down into a stereo mix, and the dialogue gets drowned out. If you watch it in 5.1, it's fine, and the only way you can usually watch that is on like Blu-ray or something like that, because otherwise you're watching a compressed signal. But when people are watching on laptops, it's like, oh, what kind of sound are they getting out of a laptop? Just
how much does a 5.1 setup cost? I just haven't bothered since the 90s.
Oh, nowadays home theater box or 5.1, like you can do like wireless speakers, and I don't know what latency is like, but. It's not expensive. It's not difficult, and
are we talking like $500, something like that?
Yeah, probably even less, depending on what kind of quality or brand name you're looking at.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, yep, it's good. It's good stuff.
Go check the brick.
The
good old brick.
The brick. There's your Canadian content for this week.
Oh anyway.
If you want to read the press release and the bullet points for Freely TV, have a look at the show notes at radiofreescaro.com. Chicago TARDIS is coming up in that weekend. The weekend that 3 episodes of Doctor Who might well air on Disney Plus. There's going to be a Chicago TARDIS convention, which is why I'm not going, because I want to be there just in case. Because I can't imagine doing potentially 3 episodes of this podcast while also being at a convention. It's nuts. But Chicago TARDIS is really building up to be one hell of a convention, announcing Rachel Talalay coming to Chicago TARDIS that weekend, possibly to watch even the episode that she directed. She directed the first one, Star Beast, and amongst a whole bunch of other people. Colin Spall's also got, you can't have a Doctor Who convention without Colin Spall. He's going to be there. Jeff Rawle. I don't think I've ever seen Jeff Rawle do a Doctor Who convention. He was in Frontios, for crying out loud, as well as in Sarah Jane Adventures, and also he's been in a bunch of stuff in Big Finish, and played Mervyn Pinfield in Adventure in Space and Time. But I don't know nothing about Harry Potter.
No, nor do I. No. And I don't want to know.
I'd forgotten that he played Pinfield.
He was Pinfield, yeah. Pinfield, and so that's on top of 3 different doctors: Fraser Hines, Caroline Ford, Janet Fielding, a whole host of people happening at Chicago TARDIS this year, November 23rd to 25th. Actually, this weekend was what was it called in Swansea? Regenerations in Swansea, which I had mused about going to about a year ago, but never did. But a bunch of our friends did. Went off to that, so hopefully they're having a grand old time.
So far, so good from what I've seen on Facebook.
Yeah, that's good. Well, it's over now, probably. It's like a 2-day event, 1-day event.
Great question. I don't remember.
They do them.
I just know there's a bunch of people in Swansea.
That's true. There are,
including Gallifrey One organizer Sean Lyon.
That's right. He went there. Our friend Felicity, Jeff,
Bill
went over there too. That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
Jason. Yep.
Yeah. Just we're not revealing their last names, just in case they don't want to be flagged as having gone. I don't know why. We're protecting their privacy.
They're on a government list. Yes.
S. Lyon? No, that's too obvious. Sean L. There we go. That's perfect. The Radio Times has counted down the top 100 shows, and they've asked people who know about TV, including one Russell T Davies, to curate the list.
What does that guy know? Come on.
I don't know. They've rather uncontroversially listed them in chronological order so as to not have debate.
And what's impressive is it's not just it's TV and radio both.
Yeah. And also
the wireless has had such a massive impact.
That's
in the
true.
UK.
And also,
to be fair, it has. Radio is viable over there.
Yeah.
As opposed to here.
It did, yeah. Also,
the Archers is still going.
These are things that aired on the BBC on UK TV, not necessarily made by UK TV. So Star Trek is on there because it aired on BBC One. Yeah, Breaking Bad, which seems ridiculous to me, but. Star Trek replaced Doctor Who once the war games wrapped up. It's like, should we try this recently canceled sci-fi series from America called Star Trek? Sure, why not? I guess it's cheap and easy. So anyway, Doctor Who is on the list. Don't be alarmed. It's there in number 15 in ranked by chronological order. So is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the radio series. I'm just scrolling through the list right now. Gangsters is not there. The Tripods is not there. Cosmos is there. Carl Sagan's Cosmos, which aired on the BBC.
All our grossing out the window.
Yep. Tanko is there. I'm just mentioning stuff that I recognize. Blackadder. Never looked at this until this very moment. The Singing Detective, which I have somewhere, haven't watched. The Simpsons aired on Sky One, therefore on the list. Then you get all of the American imports like the Larry Sanders Show and everything else. Is The Thick of It on there, I wonder? Queer as Folk is on there. If The Thick of It isn't on here, I'm going to be very upset. The Thick of It is
where's
not
Red
on
Dwarf?
Here.
Where's Brass? Where's the stuff I watched when I was a teenager?
Yeah, no. It's I don't see Red Dwarf
Thick of
on
It is not on here.
No.
That's surprising.
So the list is spurious, and I do not like it at all, and I had much higher hopes going into it.
I also enjoy how some of the entries were put in there from by Michael Grade.
Shows I've canceled. This is what it is.
He just kept crossing out Doctor Who, and RTD just kept putting it right back in.
Back in there.
It's like they have a shared Google sheet that they keep editing at each other.
Yep. Just like no one knows how to lock it down. Anyway. You can read the list and complain if you wish, because the links are in the show notes. Last bit of news before we get to the Starlost, folks. The real deal here, the main event, the worldwide premiere of our Starlost segment. Big Finish has three different stories featuring the Ood, Torchwood, if you will, coming in October.
Nice.
That's theirs, not mine.
The joke wrote itself either way.
It did. In October, November, and December with various folks from who were in previous episodes of Doctor Who. Somehow being involved with Torchwood. Ida Scott, Zachary Cross, and Danny Bartok. Three people from the Impossible Planet are somehow messed up with Torchwood. I don't know how they're going to do it either. But
didn't they mention in the Impossible Planet? Sean
Parks. Sean Parks mentioned the Torchwood. Something Torchwood.
Yeah. So
in the episode,
exciting things coming from Big Finish with the love stories in October. All right.
I just love the title. Ooh, done it.
That's pretty good.
Which is the November one.
It is good. Ooh, done it. That is good. Oddly enough, Odyssey. I mean, it's right there. Call it Odyssey. I mean, it's right there. Oracle, Oudical.
Mm-hmm.
Just say everything.
Oudical sounds silly.
Yeah, just
unlike the rest of these.
Just work Ood into everything. That's how you do it.
So you're saying they didn't necessarily make a good choice in there?
No. Okay. Well, on that note,
I booed that remark. All right, folks, this is it. This has been years in the making, and now it's finally happening. After the break, we're going to be talking about the long-lost Canadian sci-fi classic, The Starlost.
The giant Earthship Ark, drifting through deep space over 800 years into the far future. Its passengers, the descendants of the last survivors of the dead planet Earth, locked in separate worlds, heading for destruction. Unless three young people can save the Starlost.
The Starlost was a TV show that debuted in September 1973 and ran for 16 episodes on Canadian TV and in U.S. syndication. It was created by sci-fi legend Harlan Ellison. It starred Keir Dullea from 2001: A Space Odyssey with special effects from 2001's Douglas Trumbull using a new system called Magicam. It was going to be amazing. It ended up being shot in a small Toronto TV studio on multicam videotape with basic CSO, cheap sets, bright lights, and a tiny budget. The audacity of this show has, for some reason, fascinated Warren and I since our childhood, and we are finally using this podcast, Radio Free Skaro, to enlighten the world on this Canadian sci-fi classic. Hello, Warren.
Hello, I'm one of three young people. Well, three old people on this, besides you.
Yep. Joining us for this voyage of discovery is new fan to this show, Annette Wierstra. Hello, Annette.
Hello, Stephen. I feel like you told me about the show quite a few years ago and said that someday we would talk about it on a podcast. And I'm really excited that today is that day.
Today's the day. And we wouldn't have dreamed of doing this episode without an author and editor who worked on over a dozen books with Harlan Ellison. And someone who DM'd me several years ago mentioning that he was such when I mentioned the Starlost. So it's his fault that we're here together. It's Jason Davis. Hello, Jason.
Hello. Now I learned the consequences of my actions, and I am here to be the specter at the banquet.
Yeah. I mean, we are here not to just dump on a show.
No, although we will a little bit.
We will a little bit. This is more of a fascination of how a project could go from conception to reality and have such a precipitous drop towards it, but yet look so endearingly cheap, so much so that it reminds us a little bit of 1970s Doctor Who. Warren, I'll ask Warren and Annette first, where you discovered the show. Warren, where did you first remember seeing the show?
I must have been flipping by, I think you mentioned off air, CFRN, which was our local CTV affiliate, which to Americans means absolutely nothing. But yeah, I was a kid. I think I was already watching Doctor Who at the time, so maybe I was a teenager. But I remember seeing it and going, oh, this looks cheaper than Doctor Who, and Doctor Who is the absolute floor by which I will not pass, which is why I never watched Blake 7, because it looked cheaper than Doctor Who, too. I still haven't watched all Blake 7, which is dumb, because obviously it was a weird false dichotomy that I operated in as a teenager.
Right.
And then I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, I said, to hell with this, I'm going to watch this thing. So I just ordered the DVD set, which is like $25 or something off Amazon, watched them all over the course of about a month. And I said to myself for this go, I'm not doing that again. So I will watch like 5 of these. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Right.
I kind of love it, but I also realize it's not good.
Yeah, I think all of us here realize it's not good. And yet, about 50% of us here, aka me and Annette, have watched all 16 episodes of the space of a week. Annette, had you heard of this show before I mentioned it to you?
No, and I have a penchant for bad things.
Right.
So things don't have to be like super good for me to enjoy them. So that is where I sit. And you mentioned it and sort of told me the story of the show, and that intrigued me. And then somehow a friend of ours, Kit, had bought the DVDs because we'd been talking about with her.
Yeah.
And then she's like had fond memories. And then she watched the first few and was like, actually, this is not as good as I remember it. And so she then gifted the DVD set to me. And I watched the first couple episodes, but then I was like, no, I'm waiting until I do a podcast with Stephen about this. So we watched the first 2 episodes on Friday together with Erica. And then I have in 4 days watched 6 while at a conference.
Yeah.
So I fit in a lot of Starlost, and there were moments when I may have regretted it.
I did a little bit. We'll get into it. We're not going to do an episode by episode summary here. We're going to look at why the show started out as it did. There's a pitch video that exists, which is brilliant because it's basically Keir Dullea and Douglas Trumbull selling the show to American syndication buyers, basically. And even between there and then, it's only called Starlost in this pitch video. The main character that he plays is someone that who has a different name by the time it comes by. By the time it's actually being made, 2 Canadian actors are cast opposite him. So it's 3 people as opposed to 1 young person. So even between the pitch video and the way they make it changes. But Jason, I'm intrigued to hear your insights because you worked for many years with Harlan Ellison. How did you come to work with Harlan, and how did you come to learn about the Starlost?
Well, I learned about the Starlost initially when I started reading the works of Harlan Ellison, and I came across an essay of his reprinted in a number of places, the title of which is Somehow I Don't Think We're in Kansas, Toto. And it's about basically what you described, the conception of and then deterioration of the concept from the initial idea through to what arrived on the screen almost a year later. And I became Harlan's editor through a long and convoluted chain of events that I won't bore you with here. But we discussed it a number of times. During my tenure as his editor, they released a graphic novel adaptation IDW put out, adapting his original script that was his actual first entry on the New York Times bestseller list, funnily enough. So there's
I just got that book today, actually.
Yeah, it's a beautiful adaptation, and it's as perfect an adaptation of the script as you could want. I mean, it's shot by shot. The artist Alan Robinson rendered the script as Harlan had written it beautifully, I think, and preserving the story as it was written before Norman Clenman rewrote it, and they shot what they shot in the summer of 1973. I should say up front that I'm a terribly biased observer. Harlan was one of my closest friends. I worked with him for a decade. Watching the Starlost is a little bit like watching a video of your friend being mugged in an alley and not being able to do anything. So
I'm only half laughing there.
Yeah.
So I watched the first one. I kind of watched the second and the third, and then I don't think I got any further than that. I think I did pop in an episode just to see Walter Koenig for a few seconds to see what was going on there.
Yeah.
But it was brutal because I see it through Harlan's eyes, and I see the potential of what he had dreamed up and put on paper, and then I see what happened to it, and I can only see the disappointment and how much it impacted him seeing what he had dreamed turn into a nightmare.
Well, so to briefly explain the plot, because this is probably something that a lot of people who are listening to this for the first time have not seen this show. Links in the show notes, by the way. It's all on my YouTube page, and I've come to realize that I am actually the person most responsible for spreading the word about the Starlost based on the number of viewing hits that I'm getting on the YouTube page for these episodes. But the basic gist of the show is there is an ark sent out to space from the doomed planet Earth, as you heard in the intro, and it's discovered that there's people, these three young people, discover that they are actually not in their little this tiny little world that they're in. They're actually part of like many different little microclimates or bubbles, essentially, on this ark, and the space ark is going off to find another planet. But something happened about 100 years ago, and the ark is now destined to hit a star and collide with it and blow up. And the main thrust of the show is that Devin, Garth, and Rachel, the three heroes, the three young people, are trying to find someone who can help steer the ark away from disaster. That's the basic gist of the show. Is this the show, Jason, that Harlan had set out to make when he started writing this thing?
Not at all. If you've seen Logan's Run, the configuration in Logan's Run is more akin to what Harlan set up with the Starlost, where you have Devin and Rachel on the run being pursued by Garth, who was Rachel's intended. In much the same way that Logan and Jessica are pursued by Francis in Logan's Run. It's meant to be a situation with two people on the run, one antagonist who's coming after them for honor rather than for any practical reasons. He's coming because the elders have basically shamed him into pursuing them because, well, do we need to go into the dynamics of why Rachel and Devin have gone on the run? I mean, Rachel and Devin are in love. Rachel is to marry Garth because the computer that dictates such things in their biosphere, which is modeled on an Amish society, dictates that this is the case, and Garth doesn't really have any interest in Rachel, but that's what the elders say has to be done. So, and then Devin discovers that, of course, it's all a charade. orchestrated by the elders. And that's when they go on the run, when they realize that this word of God that they've been following is not the case. And I apologize if I'm muddling up what happens in the actual televised version of it, because the primacy of the script is in my mind, and I'm recounting what happens therein, and whatever changes there are, I'm probably not taking in properly.
No, but it's pretty much the gist of what happens in that first episode. I mean, Garth does originally go after them, and then he eventually comes with them, essentially, at the sort of the beginning of episode 2. I mean, he's kind of a reluctant traveler at that point, but he fairly quickly turns around. I mean, it's the one episode, I think, basically, that Harlan, under the pseudonym Cordwainer Bird, which is credited in all the episodes. Is it the only one that he actually had a hand in writing, that first episode?
Not exactly. He wrote a script called Phoenix Without Ashes. That was his title for the first installment. It was rewritten by Norman Klinman, who was a Canadian writer who became the story editor after Harlan left the series, as Voyage of Discovery. And so Klinman rewrote Ellison. Ellison had outlined 5 further episodes with Canadian writers in Toronto. And some of those episodes were produced, though any resemblance to the outline that Ellison and his scientific advisor, Ben Bova, came up with are, almost coincidental. Because for the first part, obviously Garth is an antagonist in those, and he isn't in the produced version. So right away, you've got a deviation from the concepts. And I tried to figure out, I could basically tell you some of them had the title still intact. And basically, if they have a mythological character in the title, kind of like Phoenix Without Ashes or Children of Methuselah, they probably came from an Ellison premise originally at some point in the distant past. But they got further and further away from the the outlines that were created. And I don't know. I tried to put together a timeline of how everything happened. I know that the script for Klinman's script for Voyage of Discovery was dated middle of August. Show premiered the week of the 22nd of September in syndication. I don't know what the CTV date was, but we're talking a month between the date on the script and the broadcast. So I mean, we're not in Innes Lloyd territory, but we're not far from it.
I had no idea that was the production turnaround in those early episodes. Wow, that's fascinating. I'm learning so much. Listen, this is the reason I brought you on, because I wanted to learn about Starlost, and the rest of the audience has to put up with me wanting to hear about it. That is fascinating, especially the brand new show, and in 1973 as well. I mean, turnaround was pretty quick in those days, but that feels quicker than usual, especially for like a science fiction show. Am I right?
I would assume so. I mean, it's videotaped. I couldn't tell really if they were shooting it as live.
I think they are. I think a lot of it is.
I didn't see any indication that they weren't. So, I mean, if they were doing a show in, let's say 2 hours or 3 hours, whatever would have been the standard at the time, I can't imagine. I can't imagine actually that it's as luxurious as the recording of a Doctor Who episode, let's say. So let's imagine that they're doing it in, twice the time slot. So 90 minutes, maybe. I don't know, but it looks like it. It looks like it.
I know. I imagine they probably shot it over 3 or 4 days. I think, like basically a 90-minute Doctor Who episode, 4-part Doctor Who story. If it was all studio, it would take 6 days. I can't imagine them doing it any more than that. I mean, it's 50-minute episode, so there's like 3 days probably. And the way it was shot in Toronto on, it feels very much. And Warren and Annette, you can attest to this, about like some very cheap 1970s and 1980s Canadian TV productions that we have probably seen over the years.
Oh yeah, for sure. And just we are less experienced in doing it this way than the Brits are, right? So, and we didn't have the money to do it like the Americans do. So yeah, it was probably pretty slipshod. If anything of my experience of TV in the 90s and in Canada gives me of the 70s, I would say it was probably very slipshod.
And you mentioned the BBC. This originally began or was pitched to Harlan as a BBC co-production with 20th Century Fox. So it started, apparently there were originally going to be a series of videotaped miniseries, of which this would be one. And a gentleman at Fox called Harlan in and, invited him to do this show, and the gentleman at Fox wanted to do basically The Fugitive in Space, because that format wasn't tired by 1973 at all, much less 20 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And Harlan instead pitched him the Starlost, which is how the whole thing happened. And at some point along the line, Harlan, who had dreams of going to the UK and shooting at Television Center, with all the state-of-the-art equipment therein at the time, and had this vision of, hanging out in just post-swinging London, which would have been right up his alley, finds out that instead he is expected to go to Toronto to shoot it
Not even
there.
really Toronto.
Yeah.
And so, that's one of the things I talked with Warren about previously when he and I had discussed the Starlost. I had thought, and I have since revised my theory, or eliminated my theory, killed my theory. I had thought that perhaps Moonbase 3, the Barry Letts, Terrence Dicks series that was run between seasons 10 and 11 of Doctor Who, I thought, because it was a BBC 20th Century Fox co-production on videotape at the same time, that maybe it might in some way have been part of this series of videotaped productions that were going to be made, that the Starlost ended up being part of. But apparently Moonbase 3 was in development a little bit earlier than that. It was so I don't know, the dates don't quite line up, but I still kind of wonder if there is some relationship, just to tie this into Doctor Who, because I feel compelled to, since we're on Radio Free Skaro.
Naturally, yeah.
And I mean, of course, Barry Letts and CSO, if CSO run amok. So, there's that tie-in as well. Just people using CSO for things it was never meant to do.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like, so Douglas Trumbull's there on the great thing about this, there's a pitch video, and Douglas Trumbull and Keir Dullea are there and selling the show, and they come up with this like, Trumbull's like worked on 2001.
A genius.
I mean, he's a genius in
and
the
a
field.
direct-to-silent running by this point, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, 72, I want to say, or 71,
I think
around
so,
there.
yeah.
And he invented a system called Magic Cam, which we would know years later. Well, we know because we at Radio Free Skaro keep beating the drum for Scene Sync, which is what they made Meglos with. And if you've watched Cosmos, it's Carl Sagan from 1980. There's a couple episodes there that use it quite predominantly, and it works then, even though it was hell to do, because there's basically what the system is there's the full size set and a camera shooting it, and then that camera is sort of connected to another camera which is shooting at the same rate, basically computer controlled, a miniature set. And so you basically get away with doing motion shots on a CSO green screen for those people who watch things now, type of set. And that's how you get things. And it's funny because the pitch video, which is in the YouTube playlist in the show notes if you want to watch it, looks fun and neat for CSO in 1973, but it doesn't move. So right then and there, I feel like they were hoping that this process would work, and they quickly realized that it would not. And do you remember Harlan Ellison sort of saying, like, that's what sort of sunk his dreams of this show being a grand science fiction epic, when we realized that the main hook of the show, this new way of shooting it, was not going to work?
I think he was gone by then.
Wow, really?
He
okay.
the timeline is very difficult to track down. There's not a lot of hard and fast facts that one can pin down about it. I mean, this is the sort of stuff that drives me nuts personally. But I think Trumbull, I don't know exactly when that all went awry, but he left prior to it going on the air. So Trumbull was no longer involved, though he was credited on it. Ben Bova left also, basically because he wanted to put a pseudonym on, just as Harlan had done, as scientific advisor, but they wouldn't allow him because it wasn't in his contract, so he left. Harlan was gone before they shot the first episode. I think he had requested that he be shown the tape to determine whether or not he was going to put Cordwainer Bird on as his Writers Guild registered pseudonym for things he disavows. So he had at least seen a few minutes of the first episode, and I suspect just seeing the opening shot would have been sufficient for him to take his name off of it, because it completely blows the whole, any element of surprise that could be in the first episode. It's completely undermines any possible drama with that opening shot. And so, well, not to mention the title sequence before that. But yeah, so I mean, he was, it was people trying to get away with their dignity intact at a certain point. And I know he commiserated with Walter Koenig, who was the only person who was contractually bound to it and couldn't escape, and had to do his 2 episodes in the first 16. He's lucky they didn't pick it up because he had more to do in the last batch. So dodged a bullet there, Walter.
I don't know. It's the most memorable thing I've seen him in, but I'm biased.
No kidding.
Yeah. The one thing that they do, they try to do anyway, throughout certainly the first part of the series, it just sort of tails off towards the end. It's like they introduce the 3 cast members and they focus on like one guest star. Like the first 10 episodes are basically and special guest star. The first one is Sterling Hayden, who famous Hollywood legend. A lot of people know him from Dr. Strangelove, of course, the bodily fluids general. He sort of stars as the leader of this Amish village. You get Ed Ames in there, who was a big name at the time. You get, of course, Walter Koenig, who shows up twice as the alien Oro. What did everyone think about the star guest star policy? Annette, had you heard of these people before we watched this show?
Most of them, like some of them look familiar. I'm like notoriously bad at knowing anything. The one I was texting you about is like, Danger Bay Dad is here.
Donnelly Rhodes.
Yes,
Donnelly Rhodes is in there, yeah.
I was like, yeah, he's so young.
Donnelly
He's playing
Rhodes,
this villainous guy.
Yeah, Donnelly Rhodes is in episode 11, I think. I saw him. Sorry, just as a sideward, I saw him at the very opening scene of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid not too long ago. He's in that too. So he was quite clearly an actor who was, getting work on both sides of the border here. So to get Donnelly Rhodes in an episode of the Starlost, which is a bit of a coup.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the cast list now, and I'm seeing John Colicos and Simon
Colicos.
Oakland and. Yeah, you mentioned Ed Ames. So.
Yeah.
I mean, I did enjoy Oro and his returning character, which I thought, are we leading up to something in a season finale and an arc
Not really.
here? No, we are not. It just felt like it was leading somewhere, and then it did not.
It was. Yeah.
But,
I'd like to sing the praises of 2 of them. John Colicos, obviously, because he's Colicos. I actually went to a bar in Toronto where there's a little plaque with his name because it was his favorite place to sit when he was in this bar, and he was friends with everybody. It was like a regular, basically, and apparently a lovely fella. But he's great in The Goddess Collaborator. He's great in everything. He's great in Star Trek. He's great in I was going to say new Star Trek, but Deep Space Nine is not new Star Trek. And he's great in he's great in the original Battlestar Galactica. Like he's just a cut above in all this stuff. The other person is Paul Rodriguez in City of Death, mostly because it's not that he's all that great. He's pretty decent in the show, all things considered. But I just read up on him afterwards, and I'm like, this guy's fascinating. He did a ton of stuff in the States. He was like the first black flag officer on Star Trek and court martial, and he was also like a big civil rights African Canadian advocate back when he would come up to Canada. So I was like, this guy's super interesting, regardless of what he was doing in the show.
When he's miniaturized and trying to
they're in Radio Shack basically.
Stop a bombing.
Get that 99-in-1 test kit that I had as a kid.
Yeah, there's it. So the show, like, they go to very different capsules around the arc and interact with people. They just sort of show up at the beginning of each episode. They go, we just got here and here we are now.
And that's what I love about Harlan's concept is the scope. That you have the ability to visit these 100 different worlds, and each one is a self-enclosed biosphere, completely ignorant of what's going on outside of it. So it's the opposite of Star Trek's Prime Directive, where Devon's basically wandering into each one of them and upsetting the apple cart, because at the end of the day, he's got to make these people into a unit in order to figure out how to steer the ship away from the star it's headed toward, which I think, from what I saw of the show, is kind of lost and not really dealt with. The fact that he's trying to form a union of people in order to prevent their total annihilation. Yeah,
the concept of the show
it's a great idea.
Is actually a great idea. We watched, Annette and I and my spouse Erica watched. I had only intended to sit down and watch that first episode and hope that they could get through it. But Erica really wanted to watch the second one after that because the concept of it was a good one, and it still probably remains a good one. And the production sadly is what it let it sit down. There's some dodgy performances, not really from the main cast. I think Keir Dullea actually acquits himself very well. You could tell he gives a damn. And I don't know what he thought of it after the fact, but I felt like he was actually, I felt maybe because he was in the pitch video and seemed so hopeful for the show. But I don't know. I quite enjoy Keir Dullea as the lead in this show. What does everybody else think about him?
I think you're right. I think he does put in, like, he looks like he's trying. It's like, this is going to be a hell of a comparison, but if you watched Caligula with Malcolm McDowell, that's a terrible film, a terrible pornographic film, but what's his name? Malcolm McDowell does his best in the circumstances, like, and he's a really good performer. So given all the stuff happening around him, you're like, I'm kind of impressed with this particular guy at this particular time doing this thing.
Yeah. Annette, did you have any thoughts about Keir Dullea?
Well, I just think in general, I didn't find the acting was the problem with the show. There were some characters that were like vastly overacted, but in sort of the context, I was okay with that. I feel like they were held back by really hodgepodge writing that sort of dragged things out or lost the point, like Jason said, where you kind of have the concept, but it disappears and then comes back. And then I'm like, I think we solved it, but did we not solve it? I don't know. So it was like, yeah, it was just, I felt the writing was more of a problem than the performances.
And at the time, from what I understand from Harlan's essay and from talking with him, I don't think Canadian television had ongoing shows of that kind for there to be anybody experienced to do it.
Nope.
So it's kind of, it's asking a lot of these writers to be able to leap into that when there's no infrastructure where they could have been practicing their craft on previous shows. I guess there was a show called Police Surgeon that I know that I think Kleinman may have come from that. Mm-hmm. And Kleinman had worked in Los Angeles, and he was the one who people kept advising Harlan to seek out as a story editor because he fit the Canadian content regulations, but also had experience in U.S. television at the time. And so that was sort of how that came about, that Kleinman ended up being on the show and succeeding Harlan as the story editor. But yeah, I mean, I think, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I have a memory of maybe a year or so ago, Erica saying on Twitter that she would have loved to have seen Ursula K. Le Guin write a Doctor Who episode. I have this memory in my head, and I thought to myself, oh, well, the only time that Ursula actually did contribute to a television show that I'm aware of is her storyline for the goddess Calabra in the Starlost.
I mentioned that to her after we had watched episode 2, and after Annette had gone home, and we'd put the DVD away, and because I'm trying to think, I don't remember if it's credited on screen or not. I think it's just Martin Lager or Lager.
Yeah, Lager, whatever it is. Yeah.
And I don't think it actually says from a story by Ursula K. Le Guin, which is fascinating to think that, somewhere in there were some sci-fi heavy hitters doing their best with this. Martin Lager seems to have written a large portion of them, even though he's a Canadian writer. I don't know what else, I'm literally just looking through this IMDb page right now, writing various things here. He wrote 12 episodes of The Littlest Hobo later on. So,
yes.
So his other contribution to a Canadian icon. But, and also, like, I find that the direction I feel like it's made by people who, for the most part, make basically Canadian soap operas at the time.
Oh yeah,
like The Trouble with Tracy or something like that. Like these, other
lasted one episode, so maybe not that one.
No, I know it lasted a whole season, I'm afraid.
There's another one I'm thinking of. Yeah, it was a failure after one episode.
Although I will say that Joseph L. Scanlon, who directed 5 episodes of The Starlost, went on to direct a lot. He directed like several episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation in the 80s and 90s. So he actually went on to a bit of a television career, and he directed the most episodes. But some of them are just like, if you watch this, folks, what you expect from multicam videotape of Doctor Who in the 70s and 80s is what you get here. It's flatly lit. It's very bright. It's multicam. It does not look good, honestly.
Which is why it rules.
I think comparing it to Doctor Who is kind of raising people's expectations, because I mean they don't cut back and forth. They sit on static shots for lengthy periods of time. It's almost as if the guy at the switcher is unconscious and has to be awoken every time they want to change shots.
They do. Yeah. Well,
it felt.
Yeah. Go ahead, Annette.
It felt like very stagey, right? I think probably because of that. Just someone put up a camera and we're watching something on a stage. Yeah. And even how the sets are built, they feel like they're very interchangeable because you're seeing the same wall pattern shifting and being
which
moved,
makes sense.
Which it totally makes sense, right? But that made it to me feel like, oh, we're watching sort of a play on TV.
Mm-hmm. And a badly staged play in that there's no dynamic tension at all in the placement, in the blocking of the people on the screen. They're all just lined up like it's the Last Supper in every shot. And then you have a close-up on one of them, and then a close-up on the next one, and then a close-up on the next one. I'm just thinking of the first shot of the first episode, where we have that, a three shot, and then a close-up on each, and then we end up on Devon, and we get a voiceover, and then we get a flashback, and it's so static and so it's like watching paint dry.
Yeah. You can tell, like, when you look at like science fiction films, for instance, or even just normal TV back in those days, for some reason you can get away with long static shots on film easier than you can on video. There's a certain grain, there's a certain feel to film that even though it's a static shot, it feels like there's a richness to the picture that you can maintain that. And I feel like it was sort of written and designed in the mind of the director to be like this, and then you put it onto video and it just loses all of it. And you're right, that fascinating. The very first scene is when Devon, Rachel, and Garth find out that they're actually on a big giant space ark, and we cut back to each individual person, each of them looking in different directions, I might add. No one's looking at the same eye line. And Garth says we have to go back. And then later on in the episode, it's a flash forward, and then we cut back, and then they eventually make it there, and we see the exact same sequence again for as long as it is. It's astounding. I want to say the first several episodes is the main three cast and one or two guest actors, and that's it. And then a change. I don't know if I know Jason didn't watch them all, so I'm telling you. Come about episode 11, actually episode 10, when Ed Ames and Mr. Smith of Manchester is the episode that he's in. All of a sudden, the main three cast members are almost put to the side. There's an episode called Astromedics, episode 11, where Devon is in a coma for pretty much the entire thing. Garth and Rachel are just sort of talking about why is he in a coma, and it's the guest cast that carry that entire episode for the most part, which is interesting. So at some point, they must have found a budget to maybe not build sets and everything, although they did build a big space shuttle for Walter Koenig when he showed up. But at some point, they decided, let's actually have a bigger cast of actors, which I find fascinating. Obviously, Harlan Ellison was involved with that, but there was a shift in the direction of how to make this show, and it was to bring in more actors.
It would be fascinating to see the production paperwork, to see what the actual budgets were, to see what the schedules were, all of that sort of stuff that, that as Doctor Who fans, we take for granted that we can get on the, the supplements of the Blu-ray sets. All that information, that wealth of how they did it, not to mention then even the interviews and so forth and so on. I mean, I've been writing a book on Babylon 5 for the last 4 years, and I know quite a bit about the production, but this Starlost, it's sort of opaque, even with the insights that I have from knowing Harlan and, having heard his side of the story. He obviously wasn't there by the time they went into production, but I don't think he ever even visited the studios. Honestly, I never got that impression. He met with the writers in the 4 seasons in Toronto. He had these grueling 12-hour days where he just met one writer every 30 minutes and talked to them, get a sense of where they were coming from and what they could do and what they were interested in. And then he assigned them all premises, and then he met with them each for 3 hours, helping them break the stories, and then sent them off the script. And then he was gone after that. So, there was a lot there at the beginning. How much of it survived to what arrived on Norman Klinman's desk for him to script edit? Who knows? Obviously, what's on that? Because I've never seen the scripts or anything. I don't have no access to any of that, so I have no idea what became of those outlines and how they got from Harlan's detailed breakdowns that he did with Ben Bova to what aired on the screen.
Well, it's fascinating that you say that he actually met with all the writers, broke down the stories, had it all planned out. So was it just the production, just the failure of production that convinced him to flee from the show as fast as he could?
It was that there were business dealings also that were not being handled in a way he found satisfactory. So there were a number of things happening on multiple fronts that were all warning signs, and he heeded the warning signs quite rightly, I think. Ben Bova had been brought on board. At the time, Bova was the editor of Analog magazine, which was the more nuts and bolts SF periodical of the time. And he had been brought in to make sure everything was scientifically accurate. This is a man who had been a technical writer for the Vanguard project and had worked at a number of research labs. So he had a very strong technical background, scientific background. I don't know what his actual degree was in, but he was Dr. Ben Bova. I know that. And he had worked out with Harlan the ins and outs of the ship, which was meant to look like a bunch of grapes floating through space. No aerodynamic element to it at all. No intent for it to ever land on a planet. None of that sort of thing. It was meant to be proper, well-considered SF with life support systems and, all that good stuff. It was supposed to be kind of hard SF with the ability to do a more fantastical story in individual biospheres if you could find out some sort of mechanism to justify them. One thing I don't think I mentioned earlier on was that originally Walter Koenig was going to play Garth.
I did not know that. Interesting. Wow.
And the pursuit element was only going to be for 5 of the episodes, and then Garth would be killed off under various circumstances, and hence Walter Koenig still a guest star, only appearing in 5 episodes. But then when the pilot script came in, the people liked Garth so much they decided he should be a regular, and that's at that point, because of the Canadian content regulations, Walter was out. And Robin Ward was in. Robin Ward, who went on to do the narration for the Twilight Zone in the 80s, including Harlan's episode.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Narrated Harlan's episode of the Twilight Zone, one of Harlan's episodes.
Gosh, wow. I tried last night. I was, looking into this. As you say, Jason, it's tough. It's tougher to find documentation and everything else behind this show. I was wishing and hoping and trying to sort of like pin, put the wheels together, and that Walter Koenig was not going to be hired on to do Star Trek the Animated Series in 1973, and thus went to the Starlost instead. But that is pure wishful thinking on my part, I think. But I'd love for someone to connect the dots to say that Koenig was not able to get, because they legendarily cheaped out on paying the cast. It was only Leonard Nimoy who fought for as much as he could to get the original cast on board, except for Koenig. And it was Koenig who went off and did the Starlost. I would love that to be true, but it's a dream right now.
Oh, Koenig did get a writing assignment on the animated Star Trek, so
that's true. He did. He did. Right? Yeah.
Okay.
He did. I know that because I read that. Yeah. So, another aspect of this that I found really annoying is that the music, the theme, the theme music and the incidental music were all done by just basically a music house called Skaro Productions, and there are 5 or 6 different tracks basically, and they play out through the entire episode. Basically, if a scene if a scene at some point has like a romantic element to it, then the entire scene will have this music played on top. It doesn't actually move or elevate with the scene in question. The mixing is bad. It plays out very low in the mix as well. That to me signaled probably even more so than the actual visuals how cheap it was. Does anyone have any thoughts about the music and how it was used?
I think you summed it up pretty well there, to be honest with you.
It's delightfully retro and basic, and what they have like 3 instruments, flutes and recorders, I think.
Pretty much.
I do love the theme song. The theme song is funky as hell. So
when you watch 16 episodes in a week, let me tell you, that earworms you pretty quick.
Yeah.
I have been humming it in my head way too often.
Terrifyingly, I think the animated Star Trek had more cues that they reused over and over again than the Starlost did.
Oh, right. But that music's better. So,
yes, But what I'm curious about is Stephen mentioned the name of the company, Score Productions, or
yeah, that's the one. Yep,
Score Productions. Yeah, which just sounds so like it sounds like a garage in an industrial park somewhere.
It probably was a garage in an industrial park.
And you wonder if they supplied the same music to some other show.
Oh, I guarantee they did.
That you can find the Starlost theme, as some race music behind some some cheap direct-to-video version of Chariots of Fire or some such.
Well, there's that jazz music on the old 60s Spider-Mans? That would show up in a lot of Canadian shows you wouldn't expect it to, just because it was canned music. There was a sewing instructional show from like the 80s that was on Access, which is our educational channel, not public domain, but public, access
public
channel.
Access channel.
And yeah, and so this old guy would be sitting there sewing, and then the music from Spider-Man would kick in, and I'd be like, "What the hell is happening?" So I think this is another example of that. It wouldn't surprise me if
stock music coming in strange places and causing strange connections.
Yeah, they did a lot of music actually throughout the 70s and 80s, and they're still around today. They still do music today.
Okay, so they still exist. Interesting.
They still exist. They're basically, they have just a huge catalog of stock music. Sadly, I have been unable to attain any of the original tracks, but the search will now continue. Believe me, I want to get the original soundtrack somehow for all 5 or 6 tracks used throughout the entirety.
I would love to know who composed them, because sometimes, that stock music ends up being composed by people of note.
Well, they did have some notable people. I don't have it at to hand, but if you look on archive.org, and that's the only bit of score production music that I could find, they produce stuff like the Monday Night Football theme, like CBS Sports, like actual proper American TV productions. They weren't just some little Canadian outfit. So they did have some reputation to them. But I am curious if also, like, one or two of the cues, oddly enough, one of them reminded very much of Dudley Simpson's score from The Evil of the Daleks, which I'm sure is a coincidence, given that it never aired in Canada in its lifetime. But like, there are certain similarities to it. So it's clearly a science fiction-esque thing. Even the original theme song, which is all orchestral, and there's a version of that theme that's on Apple Music and Spotify. It's the only Starlost you can find on Apple Music. That has been, when you listen to it, as you did at the top of the segment, it's actually been sort of science fictionized with like the theremin kind of sound, like that Star Trek kind of made popular in a way. So even then it was sort of augmented to become more of a science fiction sort of thing. So yeah, I'd be intrigued to know. And maybe after this, I'm gonna drop a line to Score Productions and see if I can track down who composed the original score for the Starlost and what happened to it, because it'd be quite fascinating. Yeah. This has been a lot of fun. We're not done yet, but I just I don't know what else you want to say about the Starlost. It's a show that I don't know why the show has fascinated me for the better part of 40 years.
I think I have some, for me anyway. I think it's because it's the perfect distillation of Canadian, ambitious yet a failure.
Yeah,
it just kind of laughs at itself. Maybe it doesn't, but we do. So Canadians are just generally like, yeah, we tried and didn't go anywhere. Oh well, whatever. That's basically what the Starlost is.
No, it famously doesn't. I was watching it, and only in episode 5 is there the first semblance of humor, where the episode begins. And it's Garth, Rachel, and Devin all sitting around eating a meal, because why not? And then Devin finds something and he rushes in to tell them, quick, there's a thing happening. Let's go this way. And they all rush into the room. And then Garth comes back and grabs a sandwich and runs back out again. And I thought, that's actually funny. And that's the first joke that's in this series. There has been no humor intentional humor in the entire episode up until that very moment. It is very earnest, as a lot of science fiction is, I find, in those
Especially
days.
at the time.
Especially at the time, which is hilarious when you see some of the costumes that are in the Goddess Calabra, episode 3, the one with John Colicos, where it looks, the guards are straight out of Jesus Christ Superstar, the movie from Norma Jewison from the same year. I wonder if there was an inspiration, given what Jason says about the production timeline. It was probably out in theaters for months when they came to make that episode. Anyway, going around the horn, Annette first, what your overall thoughts, your overall memories, your regrets perhaps in watching all 16 episodes in the space of a week? What is your overall impression of the Starlost now that you've seen it all?
Okay, I'm going to say one thing, Jason. I'm going to think about the fact that Garth was supposed to be chasing them and how that would have actually added a lot of tension and drive to the story. Because I think in watching, and if you're going to watch it, I recommend spacing them out. Go for it, but space it out. Don't watch them all like so much in a row. But I think sometimes you're looking at the individual episodes and they're not great, but fine. Where I see the potential lost the most is when you sort of look at the big picture. And from the watching the first episode and the pitch video, I'm like, oh, I would love to see this remade, because I really do think there is something so interesting buried within it. And when I'm watching it, you're just seeing like, oh, there's that kernel. There's those pieces that if we pulled this forward or pulled this together in a different way, we could create a show that, well, not me, I'm not going to be creating it, but someone could create a show that has so much more drive and, well, this had a lot of ambition, but execute on the ambition. And it's still there. Like, that's the thing watching it that was so interesting, and kind of the remnants of that show that could have been. And that's part of what makes it so interesting to watch, because I think on its own it fails in a lot of ways, but also there's some delightful things like an overuse of green foam on everything and magic green bath mats that allow you to float off. It's just
those are great. I love them.
I love so many little bits of it, but there is something so much better buried within it, and seeing that within the show is what kind of made it an interesting and fascinating watch.
Warren, what about you?
Well, I got 3 disparate things. One, we never mentioned Moo Lambda, who is one of my favorite cranky computers of all time. This jerk beard computer yelling about Denison.
Moo Lambda. I need to explain. Moo Lambda is the computer, the computer interface that's everywhere on the ship, and he speaks in the most weird manner. Can I be of assistance? He has these weird. It's a remarkably quirky performance of the actor.
Just a jackass. He's not a nice man.
That too. Yeah. You need to see to believe. Anyway, I cut you off.
I was just going to say, secondly, one of the things that I find it fascinating because the whole Doctor Who-ness of it all. But besides that, is just there was such an assemblage of just an insane assemblage of talent in front of him, behind the camera, and it just kind of came to nothing, right? And so that's what I find interesting about it. It's just like I've already drawn one terrible parallel, but it's like watching Richard Nixon's career. What an intelligent, brilliant politician who then just screwed it all up. It's kind of around the same time.
Exactly. Yeah.
But thirdly, I was just thinking while we're talking about this, I can't think of another Canadian show that swung for the fences like this in the same genre until Lex. I might be wrong about that, but I can't think. And it's equally not so great.
Nope.
But and not anywhere near as many talented people involved. But I can't think of anything that comes close in sort of the tone and tenor and all the rest of it.
No, science fiction is never a thing again in Canada until like the cable TV years, basically. Until space, the Imagination Station starts up in 1997, and it becomes like, okay, maybe we can make shows now in Canada.
And then we have a rep for it, which we then just fizzled away because, of course, we do.
Yeah. All right, Jason. I've been threatening this episode for several years now. You have a history with Harlan Ellison. What are your parting thoughts about the Starlost, how it came to be, and everything around it?
Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate those of you who were able to watch 16 episodes in rapid succession for your constitutions. It's an astonishing feat, one that I am not capable of, because I know I'm going to die at some point, and there are other things I can be doing. But I just, as Harlan's advocate for the show, first first of all, on the show, let me just say, nobody sets out to make a bad television show. It takes just as much effort to make a bad television show as it does to make a good television show. And just sometimes, the pieces don't align. So, I applaud the ambition that went into the making of the show. With that in mind, I commend to you Harlan Ellison's the adaptation of Harlan Ellison's script that was published by IDW, still readily available, I believe, still in print. Slightly harder to find is Ed Bryant's novelization of Harlan's teleplay, which does some very interesting things to expand it. Some really interesting choices are made. Bryant was Harlan's student and protege, and did a phenomenal job of basically rendering what Harlan had in mind with a few twists. Back in 1975, it was to be the first in a series of Starlost novelizations. Obviously, that didn't happen. And finally, Harlan's essay, somehow, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, Toto, which can be found in his collection Stalking the Nightmare from 82, and also The Essential Ellison from 1991, reprinted later in 2001, I think. It's a fantastic essay. You get Harlan's perspective on what's going wrong and how it's all going, step by step. Basically, you see, iceberg off the starboard bow, or iceberg approaching, making contact. Why don't we have enough lifeboats? You see the whole thing, in gruesome red asphalt slow motion from his perspective. And so as Harlan's advocate, I commend to you the good adaptations of his script, the accurate adaptations of his script by Bryant and Alan Robinson, and then there's the show.
The show.
Yeah,
and a late add-on to Ben Bova, the science advisor, went on to write a book.
Oh yes,
called The Star-Crossed,
which I've read, and it's definitely a book from the 70s.
In 1975, it's the story of a scientific advisor who works on a low-budget television show. Yep.
Hey, he had to get something out of it.
He did. Yeah. He did. He found inspiration for his own work. Well, thanks, everyone on this panel, and indeed all of you for listening. It's the Starlost. We appreciate noble failures sometimes on this show, and we're fascinated by them. And I hope you enjoyed our indulgences into looking at the Starlost. And I encourage you to sample this show in experience it in your own right, to see what we're talking about and see how so much could be made with and of so little at the end. It's the Starlost. Anyway, Warren, as always, thank you for indulging ourselves with this. Annette Wierstra, thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me on this ride. I have no regrets.
Yeah, Jason Davis, thank you as always for your wonderful contributions to this.
Thank you for having me.
There we are, the Starlost, folks. Chris still hasn't watched an episode of the Starlost.
He's a smart guy. Not us.
No,
I did watch the little info text style snippet things you made and put on on YouTube.
Proper Starlost fam. Thanks. Work. Yeah, well, you know what? That inspiration came to me literally the day after we recorded. Like, you know what? I should put a little thing together because people don't know about the Starlost. And as I was watching that hallway scene when they had to shoot it 11 different times because the set was only 20 feet long and they had to just stop in a room. This is what Doctor Who did. They would stop. Tom Baker would run up to the camera and then stop, and then they'd talk for the rest of it. But no, we have to keep walking, and it was ridiculous.
Yeah, to be completely fair, how many other shows did the exact same thing? I'm sure most of them did. Like Star Trek's corridor wasn't all that long, as I recall, the original TOS corridors.
No.
There's like 1.5 of them or something.
Yeah. There was another corridor scene with in the Ed Ames episode where they're sort of strolling along a little bit and they do the exact same thing. And I thought, well, I can't do it twice. So fun. Old time TV. Let me tell, I do want a special shout out. I can't remember who commented on one of our videos on our Facebook page. but this person said, "Oh, if you like 1970s sci-fi shot on videotape, check out the 1978 Norwegian show Blind Passenger, which is Stowaway." Which I'd never heard of. And I Googled it the exact same night that Ahsoka was dropping. And I thought, okay, let's still fire up Ahsoka. But let's just see what this Blind Passenger. And like 6 minutes of some of the most motionless television I've ever seen. And I was like, oh, no, I have to stop. This is way too up my alley.
I did the exact same thing. I'm like, I can't keep watching this. I don't understand a word of it. I'm just going to make up my own stupid story. What am I doing here?
Oh, man. There's only 3 episodes. It's called Blind Passenger, or just search Stowaway. It was the first ever Norwegian science fiction television thing ever made. It was on videotape. And when you think about how Norway sort of like cornered the market on slow TV decades later, you see why. You see why when you watch the first 6 minutes of
1978 on TV. They're pretty good.
Yeah. And there's like there's a creepy bit in the beginning. I think this is intriguing to me. Why am I like this? Why does Disney spend so much money to make Ahsoka, and I'm enthralled by 6 minutes of?
Because you and I have the SD sickness. The lower the resolution, the more fascinated we are.
Maybe it is. Anyway, there's your if you're done watching the Doctor Who trailer, watch 16 episodes of the Starlost. It links in the show notes, and watch 3 episodes of Norwegian sci-fi from 1978, and you will pass the time until November, or until even next week if you want to binge them for our next episode of Radio Free Skaro. On that note, we'll be back to regular program. I think we're doing we're doing part 3 of Modern Undead commentary next week, unless something else breaks. Unless we do an episode of Blind Passenger from Norway from 1978.
Oh, the gauntlet has been thrown,
yeah,
sir.
It has been thrown. That's what's happening on the podcast next week. So, until next time, I am Stephen in Edmonton.
Warren in Vancouver.
And Chris in Edmonton.
So long for now.
You've been listening to Radio Free Skaro. Find us online at radiofreeskaro.com. Follow us on Twitter and Tumblr at Radio Free Skaro. Subscribe to us on iTunes and donate to the show at patreon.com/Radio Free Skaro. Thank you.